The reports feature in the gateway is a powerful way to look at your previous transactions and see all the details about them. The easiest way to search is right from any page in the gateway. There's a search box up here, and you can use it to search for any transaction ID, order ID, last name, or card number, full or the last four. If I search here for dough, for example, I find all transactions from the past 90 days with the customer last name of dough, and I have 2 transactions here. If I have the exact transaction ID, I can paste that up here as well. That takes me to that. And if I have the last 4 of the card number, I can search that, and that brings back all transactions with that last 4 from the last 90 days. Additionally, you can go to all reporting tools under Trans Reports and go to Reports, or on the home screen, we have a link for Reports here. This page has 2 sections, the Transaction Snapshot as well as Search Transactions. The Transaction Snapshot is where you can see a summary of transactions based on a certain criteria, whereas the Search Transactions at the bottom lets you do a more fine-grained search of all transactions based on any of these criteria. By default, everything is selected to all, and the date range is the current month, so the first through whatever the current day is. If I hit Submit, that brings up those transactions, and this is, for many people, all they need. You can view more than 10 per page. I can choose 100, in which case I see all 14 of the transactions from the month of March on this account. If I go back to the Reports page, let's take a look at those fields. So first up is Status. Any is selected by default, but I can choose transactions that are in a pending settlement or complete state, pending settlement, complete, all the way down the list. Transaction Type lets me choose whether I want to search for credit card transactions or check transactions. Action Type lets me look for sales or refunds and credits or authorize onlys, captures, whatever type of transaction type. If I have multiple processors, I can choose to search for transactions on just one of those processors. This account has 4, 2 credit card and 2 check, and I can choose which one I want to return. If I'm using mobile payments, I can choose what mobile device. I don't have any licenses active on this account, so there are none here, but if I had certain phones or tablets attached, they would show up on this list. If I have a specific transaction ID, I can search for that here. Order ID, platform ID, customer ID, all of those would have been entered at the time of the transaction. Additionally, I can search for last name, the company name, or the email address associated with the transaction. If I know the bank account number or credit card number, either full number or last 4, I can search for that here. And this field right here for beans is a merchant-defined field that I've created. Any merchant-defined fields that you've created will show up on the reports page and you can search for their values. The last 2 options are amount range. I could search for transactions of, say, $0 to $10 to just look at my small transactions, or I could do $100 to $10,000 and see only my large transactions. The last section is for date range. It defaults to the current month, but I can either modify this to type out whatever date I'd like, or I can use the calendar to pull up a date picker and choose the specific dates that I'd like and search for those. For extra convenience, we have a little calendar over here that if you hover over, has a bunch of different options for specific time ranges you can look for. I can look at just today's transactions, this week, this month, down to the past 30 days or the past 365 days. And when I click that, it performs a search for that criteria. When I'm looking at a results page, I can see the transaction type. This is a card sale. I can see the status of that. I can see the transaction ID, the customer with their name and email if it was entered in the transaction. The details shows the account number, an abbreviated version of it, the time that the transaction was run, and the amount. If I want to look at one of these in more detail, I can click into the transaction ID, and that pulls up the transaction detail page. This has all the information about the transaction, and I can select text in these boxes and copy it if needed, but it's all displayed here, and I can get whatever information I need. Product information will even show in a table. At the bottom, we have the transaction history, which shows any actions taken on this transaction. So far, we've only had a card sale on here that I can see was successful. I can see the time, the amount, and where it happened. This was in the virtual terminal by this user account. When settlement occurs, I would see another action show up here, and if I voided it, that would be another action as well. A couple actions that can be taken from this page are right at the top. You can create a subscription based on this customer's information, and if I click that, it takes me to the add subscription page with all of their information filled out. It pulls it from the transaction information, so I can continue and create a subscription based on this information. If the service is active on my account, I can add to the vault, and this will do the same thing, but to the customer vault. I can submit to save this customer, and now they're saved to the vault, and I can charge them again more easily. And then when we look at these buttons, I can void the transaction from here, I can refund it, I can do a charge again action, so I can do a charge again auth or sale, and this will run a new authorization or a new sale based on this cardholder's information. And over here, I can print the receipt. If I print, that'll open a new tab with a printer-friendly version of the receipt. I can print that to go ahead, and then close when I'm done. And I can email a receipt. In this case, a new tab will open where I can enter an email address, whatever I'd like, and send it off. In most cases, the most important information on this page are the transaction ID, which is a unique identifier in the gateway that lets you track down this specific transaction. The status, this is currently pending settlement, but I would expect it to update to settled in the future and complete. As well as the card information. I can see a masked version of the credit card that was used, and this magnifying glass right here, if I click it, will let me see all other transactions in this gateway account for that card. So if this is a customer that I want to see, have they been charged before? Have I charged them any other times? That magnifying glass will return all transactions with this account number. Going back to the main reports page, we can look at the transaction snapshot, which is a much more simple search field. We have the same date range as before and the calendar picker that lets us choose a specific date range quickly. But then group by is what you want to be most interested in here. By default, we show settlement batch, so this will sort your transactions based on what settled batch they were part of. But I can choose other things. I can choose to filter by card type, payment processor, user account, transaction source, or what day, week, month of the year. Additionally, this beans one is again a merchant-defined field that I've created, and any ones that you've created will show here as well. Let's do card payment type as an example. I'll hit submit. And so this returns a table with all the payment types that are accepted on my account and how many I've taken from each one. And there's summaries. I can see how many are pending authorizations, how many were charges, refunds, returns, voids, declines. I can see my approval percentage, which is 100%, which is excellent, and the totals for each one. Over here, I can see I have a row for American Express, Visa, MasterCard, and then Discover and eChecks are here as well, but I've run no transactions. I can know I have transactions here because there's magnifying glasses and total amounts over here. If I want to get even more fine-grained, I can look at my Visa transactions, click the magnifying glass, and then I can choose how I want to group these even more. I can say view these transactions, and that will show me a list of results, just like on the previous pages where it will show all the transactions in a row. Or I can choose by any of the other criteria. So let's look at day. And now I can see these transactions. I can see some were run on the 10th and some were run on the 17th. And again, I can keep going down. I can look at by user account. I can see there's only one user who did card payment type of Visa on the transaction day of March 10th. And this is the only user that did it. I can keep going down, or I can just view these transactions, and there was only one there, but I can see all their information and click into this transaction ID, of course, to see all the information of this one transaction.